Down at work, lately, I have been tasked as one of my many jobs with a particular what we refer to as a kit pull. A kit pull basically goes and grabs parts, put them in a bin or a box or a cart, and you take it to a designated spot. Essentially, you take a whole bunch out of the warehouse and consolidate it down to one little thing. Makes it easier for the production line to install parts. I call those kit pulls. They recently gave me one that titled the 202POO. Yes, it's a very fascinating one, and we have a lot of fun with that wordage. Every day as I do it, I walk by one of my coworkers and I tell him, I say, you know what, it's that time again. And he goes, yeah, sounds like diarrhea time. Yeah, we have a lot of fun with those. Some of the best are like, when I told the boss, I said, in honor of this poll, we're going to have a diarrhea awareness week. It's going to run to Friday. Walked by another coworker and I told him, I said, hey, I found something out. Turns out diarrhea is hereditary. It runs in the family. I tell these jokes to my wife and she says they're bad. She goes, they're borderline make me un-American. Which my response to her was, well, I should see that coming a kilometer away. But these jokes that we can make are a sign of what we might call camaraderie, right? We get together, we talk about it. The coworkers and I, when we have fun, we actually aren't really doing the world's greatest job, but nonetheless, it is a job that we have to do. And that job is not necessarily great, but we're doing it together. There is a sign of we're mingling, we're joining forces, we're doing things. That is a sign of unity. Not necessarily that we're all having the greatest time, but a sign that we're doing things together, right? We're working together. In the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about giving God his glory due his name. And there was a statement that I made that someone called me out on and kind of questioned a little bit when I said, God is glorified when the church is unified. It was a really simple statement, but I want to look a little closer at that this morning. What do I mean by the church is unified? What does that actually look like? And I think the answer is, the reason's very simple. And what that looks like, we're going to see in the book of Ecclesiastes. King Solomon, perhaps the wisest man ever to walk the face of the planet, made an interesting statement in the book of Ecclesiastes. In chapter 4, he speaks to the idea of being unified with someone else or with other believers. Found in the book of Ecclesiastes, starting in verse 9, it reads, Ecclesiastes 4:9, it says, 2 are better than 1 because they have a good return for their work. If one falls down, his friend can help him up. But pity the man who falls and has no one to help him up. Also, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Although one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. Very interesting statement. He talks about unifying with someone else for multiple reasons. The first one he talks about is the unifying of if you will, you get better work results. That's a fascinating statement in of itself because did you realize that a Belgian draft horse is able to pull 8,000 pounds? One horse. 8,000 pounds. That's a lot of weight. That's a strong horse. But did you know that 2 Belgian draft horses, when properly trained in a harness, can pull up to 32,000 pounds? Do the math. That's almost 4 times. Almost 4 times the amount with the person. You get a better return for your work. Other people will say, something like many hands make the work quick. Kind of heard that. You have a big task in front of you. You just go ahead and you do it. The reason why we should be unified in work and unified in anything, the first one is the job just gets done faster. It gets done perhaps even better. You go further than you ever have gone before. That whole, if you will, healthy competition. I see a lot of that at home with my boys, right? One has to build up off the other, and the other one has to top that, and so on and so forth. When you're by yourself, you go and you say, good enough. But when you look over at Joe over there, and you realize Joe's doing a little more than you've done, you decide, you know what, I'm not gonna let Joe top me, right? You do a little bit more. That competitive nature of humanity kicks in. We get unified because we get better results. Better results because we work together. We strive together. We encourage one another together. Galatians 2:6 says that we bear one another's burdens, and so we fulfill the law of Christ. I believe that this passage in particular highlights the importance of the idea of teamwork. Teamwork within the church, teamwork within your relationships, teamwork within your job, teamwork in general. And the idea that working together yields greater results. The idea of teamwork means you're definitely going to be better. I don't know about you, but I've watched a little bit of football lately, and I look at the thing called the offensive line. Now, we can get into the X's and O's and figure out zone blocking and run blocking, pass protection, all that. But the bottom line is they work together. Do you know what would happen if they weren't working together and there was just a one man? There's 5 people on the line. If they all worked as single solitary units, no one communicates with each other. No one talks with each other. No one does anything. They've got their one job to do, and that's all they're going to do. Man, what about corner blitzes? What about linebacker packages? What about cover defenses? I know, people are looking at me like, what? What are you talking about? The point is, if an offensive line can't recognize these things, the quarterback will get sacked. Communication is necessary. The idea of working together means that we also protect one another. We get better results, better return for our work, and people generally are better protected. We do that. It's critical to recognize that glorifying God requires hard work on multiple fronts. And that work is accomplished greater when we work together in unity. And when we do that, I submit, God's name is glorified. People see that we get along, at least to the sense of we're accomplishing the goal. Our reputation goes out there that we accomplished something like that 32,000 pull when everyone else can only pull 8. God's name gets glorified when we work together. We get a better return for our work when we are unified. The second point, I think, that Solomon talks about is we should be unified because, guess what? We help each other out, not only with work, but with life. He says in there, if one falls down, his friend can help him up. I don't know about you, but I've gone on walks, with a heavy backpack on my back, and I've gone places, and I've tripped and I've fallen, and I've had someone try to, reach down to help me up. It's easier to get back up when someone's helping you back up. Years ago, I hurt my knee really bad. It was immobilized for a period of a couple of weeks. You try getting up out of a couch that way? It's difficult. It's doable, but it's difficult. We get unified. We help each other out in life. It's very interesting. Just that fundamental principle that we have of helping one up, and then also it says, pity the man who falls and has no one to help him up. Solomon recognizes that people by themselves, when they stumble, when they have problems, there's no one there to help them. It's a lonely, despairing feeling. I've talked with people who have been on some recovery program, say Alcoholics Anonymous. And they actually fall off what we call the bandwagon, right? Do you know if you don't catch them and help them back up, they usually stay off the bandwagon? Pity the man who has no one to help him up. And the same applies to our lives. when we are in a situation that is difficult and we're trying to do it and then we fall flat on our face. Oftentimes, despair wells up and we just say, woe is me. I'm not going to go on. I'm just going to quit. Far too often that happens simply because you've got no one there to encourage you, no one there to talk to you, no one there to tell you, hey, keep going, you can do this. We should be unified as a church because we can help each other out. We can help each other out that way. Take a look what he also says. He gives another example in 4:11. He says, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? I read a book recently, not that long ago, in the last 10 years. Thank you. Where it talked about World War II. And for those of you that remember the kind of the story of D-Day and the aftermath of D-Day, the Allies' landing was a huge success. Great loss of life, but it was a success. They got the troops ashore, they got food ashore, they got supplies ashore, and they were pushing the Germans across the French border. Then winter hit. And all of these troops landed in June. They didn't have winter clothing. They didn't have adequate supplies for the winter. And they're men in foxholes, which, by the way, are nothing more than muds and sticks, dug with your own hands. Snow's coming down, it's freezing, and you're wearing a pair of tennis shoes or something similar to it. Things got wet, things got cold. It was miserable. There's a trick some of these soldiers learned to play. And that they'd get together with their foxhole buddy and they'd get three of them together, right? One on the bottom, two on the sides, on either side, kind of form like a, you know that? The guy in the bottom would be warm for a little bit and they would rotate every 15 minutes. That way you kept yourself from freezing. You got 15 minutes of fairly warmth, and over and then 15 more minutes. That's what it helps us. When we as a church can help each other out in the most terrifying and the most unusual of circumstances. Sometimes we need the help of people. We can be helped. It seems interesting that when that happens, you know what the rest of the world sees? When they see us helping other people, they see a picture of God. God is glorified when we help people of the church. They see an image of the Almighty. They recognize that this is not human, but rather something extraordinary. And in fact, I've read articles that state words to the effect that most of the charitable organizations that receive the largest amount of dollars are Christian run. The world sees that. They know that. We care about our own and about the rest of the world. God's name is glorified when that happens. We should be unified because we can help each other out. We should be unified because we get better results for work. The third point, we should be unified because, guess what? We defend better. It says, one may be overpowered, but two can defend themselves. This talks to all kinds of things, literally. It could be talking about a street mugging. You know, there's safety in numbers. Maybe we've heard that statement. You go out into the world and you go out there in a dark alley and you kind of feel unsafe. Well, you feel a lot safer when you got a buddy with you. You would do things that are crazy when you got a companion that you would never do by yourself. Right? They, too, can help out. It's a crazy thing. But, you know, it's very interesting. 1 Corinthians 12:26 says, "And when another member suffer, all members suffer. And when one member is honored, all members rejoice with it." To me, this speaks to the unifying reality of what we do. When we are together, when someone gets attacked, we all feel it. When someone gets blessed, we all get happy and excited by it. It speaks to a unifying idea. It's very interesting to me that verse 12 emphasizes the importance of unity in their battle. But in Ephesians 6:10-13, the Apostle Paul reminds us that our battle is not necessarily against flesh and blood. This speaks also to a spiritual thing. Sometimes things happen for reasons unknown to us, but for God's glory. Take a look at Job. I point to him all the time. Good old Job. He had done nothing wrong, yet Satan still took away his wealth, his animals, and his family. Then, finally, God allowed Satan to take away his health, leaving him with open sores and a nagging wife. What did Job do to deserve that? Nothing. It's not recorded. What is the dialogue that happens between Satan and God. When God says, "Have you considered my servant Job, who's upright in all that he does?" It's unique that sometimes things happen simply because God's trying to prove a point to somebody else. You and I go through things that we cannot comprehend, we cannot understand. There's no way we can fully grasp what's going on with all the people in our lives and all the things that are happening. But somewhere, sometimes, God's trying to prove a point to somebody else. Our battle isn't necessarily against flesh and blood, folks. And it's a heck of a lot easier to stand up when that battle comes, when you got a brother or a sister standing there with you, shoulder to shoulder, praying for you, lifting you up. It's a heck of a lot easier when you can bear someone else's burden, Paul says in Galatians. Interesting aspect. We should be unified as we defend against these attacks, physical or spiritual, a lot better. The last one is a very unique one, and maybe going on a slight limb here. But he says, a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. I don't know about you, but I've taken branches before, broken them. And then you get the second branch, it breaks a little harder, the third branch, so on. And finally, by the time you get up there, you can get a pretty strong branch grouping, right? The point is, just fundamentally, when you add more numbers, the harder it is to break. But take a look at what he says. He stops at 3. He just says, a cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. Why 3? I think in Matthew 18, Jesus may answer that a little bit. When he says, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am in the midst of them. Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them. What does that mean? Well, it just means fundamentally that Jesus Christ himself bears some of our burdens. When we are going through a rough time, we're not doing it by ourselves. When we get our brothers and our sisters in prayer, Jesus says, I am there too. I am there too. We become stronger together. We become unified when we do that. It has a remarkable effect in our lives. When we join together in purpose, in faith, and in love, and help each other and hold each other up, we experience the tangible presence of Christ amongst us. God, literally, is with us in those hard times. We should be unified because we become infinitely stronger. So, to answer my question, why should we be unified and what does that look like? Well, it looks simple like this. Unified does not mean that we're in total agreement with everybody. Okay? We're not. There's a lot of things out there that we disagree on, like preferences, food, and even football teams, right? We disagree with a lot of things. But the fact that we can come together despite those differences and accomplish a goal, a singular faction, a singular point of going forward, well, that brings honor and glory to God. And we do so, quite frankly, because we know 2 is always going to be greater than 1. Mathematical formula, right? 1 plus 1 equals 2, and 2 is always greater than 1. We should be unified because we get a better return for our work. We can help each other out. We'll defend better. And ultimately, we become stronger. This passage reminds us, in my opinion, that our faith in Jesus Christ is the foundation of our unity. It really is. Nothing else really can cause a person to set aside all their vast differences, cultural, economical, upbringing, preferences. All of that goes put aside to the sole purpose of moving together in unity in the church is Jesus Christ. And the reason why is because he says there is but one way to God the Father. Jesus himself said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And apart from me, no one has access to the Father. The fundamental reality is that superhighway of humanity goes down to a little narrow road that leads to God. And that is where the church shines. We go down that highway, we get on that road, and we stay there. He is the way, the truth, and the life. And through him, we can find strength and victories in all the areas of our life when we work together to the glory of God the Father. Let's close with a word of prayer.